Today, I'm going to review a video by Joon Lee, former ESPN personality, now has moved on to YouTube, as he expounds on sports media being broken in this day and age. And he brought up some excellent points here and a few more that I even like to add along the way. Now, it's a very interesting video for those who love sports, just like myself and obviously Joon Lee, as we'll get to see in a moment. And some of the things that I've noticed over the years that I've even shared on my podcast that he has brought to light. But there's also a couple others that he failed to mention as well. Let's watch this one together.
Almost 2 years ago, ESPN laid me off. The moment was shocking and it broke my heart. Growing up, working at ESPN was my absolute dream job. And I was incredibly lucky to be able to live that dream for 4 years. I appeared on some of my favorite shows. I got to learn from some of the most talented, smartest people in the entire business. And every once in a while, I ended up on the TVs of every sports bar in America. So when I got that call that I was part of the company's layoffs, people start to send me texts as if I had died or as if my parents had died or a loved one had died.
Now, in fairness, ESPN, the big conglomerate that they are, is certainly not like it once was. As I used to be an avid watcher of ESPN, especially with the Baseball Tonight in the 80s and 90s, as well as NFL Primetime. I mean, they had great highlight shows. I always look forward to watching them, even some of the pregame shows over the years, whether it was Countdown for the NFL and a couple of others. But over the last 2 decades, to me, and obviously with the proliferation of so many platforms, streaming services, channels, of course, podcasts, that you can't even get into a lot of the stuff. You can just watch the highlights on your phone and not have to sit in front of a TV for an hour or an hour and a half to watch this stuff. I understand that because it's going to evolve just the way the technology has. But at the same time, ESPN, in my eyes, is a shell of its old self because a lot of it is all about the debate shows, the hot takes, and I get it. It's the entertainment and sports programming network, which that's always been their letters for their channel. But at the same time, they've focused more on the entertainment aspect, which is okay, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's good. And therefore, the sports, which of course is the games itself, and a lot of the other things that they show on top of that, whether it's the documentaries, the hour shows when it comes to trying to target certain developments in the sports world with news cycles and things of that nature. So it has gotten away for me as the big sports fan that I am, for myself to sit down to watch on a daily basis or even hit the DVR to just consume so much of their content that I can't get enough of it. To me, those days are long gone with that network. So let's hear what he has to say moving forward.
It was a really surreal moment. And in a way, I did lose someone. I lost a version of myself that had been chasing this dream for my entire adult life. For 2 years, ESPN blocked me from working. No writing, no TV, no starting this YouTube channel.
What? 2 years? I mean, what did he do? Was he taking insider information from another network? Was he doing something illegal? Did he steal laptops? I mean, seriously, ESPN? Now, I get it. When you work at a conglomerate like that, there's going to be fine print. There's going to be a situation that if you do happen to go elsewhere, or let's say if you did get laid off in his case, where you cannot go ahead and maybe go to another network or go to a publication or whatever it may be. But to withdraw him from the workforce and doing what he loves for 2 years, I mean, that's a disgrace. And over the years, I've heard a lot of things about ESPN as far as how they treated workers, and not to unpack that. That's for another vlog, maybe somewhere down the road. But at the same time, as much as they have a stranglehold, or at least they've seemed to be more so now, because there was a lull there for a time that ESPN was the giant, and they still are. But then with other networks coming into the fray and a lot of other personalities going elsewhere, it was a situation where ESPN was on shaky ground. But now, as they're moving on back up to the point where they're going to have their new streaming service platform coming up, I believe, at the end of this week or sometime before September 1st, and them showing, obviously, all the NBA games, NFL, NHL with the ESPN Plus, and all of their programming that they have that's just probably couldn't even fit in a streaming service. Well, now they feel like they can flex their muscles again to show the world that, hey, we are the top dog on the block when it comes to being able to put out sports, entertainment, etc. But is that how you're going to treat your employees, especially on the way out when you lay them off? All right, here's your severance, but no, you cannot get back on the workforce for 2 years because of ABC and XYZ? Come on. To me, that's just terrible.
I felt frustrated, sad, and angry. I had to do something that I hadn't done since I was 16 years old. I had to stop. And so I did the only thing that I could do. Sit back and enjoy watching sports as a fan again.
Enjoy watching sports as a fan again. I mean, what did ESPN do? Did they brainwash this guy? Did they take a part of his brain and plugged it somewhere else to the point where he lost all joy for not only working at ESPN, which, like you said, was his dream job, and then all of a sudden left there with pretty much half of a heartbeat? I mean, come on now. And I'm sure there's a lot that he could expound on, but I'm sure there's a lot of NDAs that he had to sign off on, because the last thing ESPN needs is to have former employees go ahead and cut them the ribbons, whether it be through print or podcasting, things of that nature. But man, that is just awful to think that a piece of him, a part of him, was just missing and lost the joy for watching sports. And I can't even imagine me as a lifelong sports fan, if they actually did that to me, I would have had to press the reset button and say, what am I doing here? But sorry I had to go through that. But man, that's almost hard to fathom when you think about it.
But what I didn't realize at the time was that what felt like an ending was my life beginning to draft a completely new beginning. It became impossible to ignore the fact that sports had changed since I'd started pursuing this career. The more that I watched, the more that I read, the more that I scrolled, the more that I felt like something was fundamentally broken in sports today. Fans were angrier today than ever before in social media and in real life. And the conversations around sports felt stuck. The same hot takes over and over and over again.
And that is one of the main problems of ESPN to this day. And I don't want to hear Stephen A. Smith could come out and say, oh, we're number one. We've been number one for 10 straight years, so on and so forth. Well, this is coming from someone, one more time, in the blood, in the DNA, cut myself open. I'm sure I bleed a baseball, basketball, football, etc. Shows like First Take are sports talk for dummies. They really are, because it is pretty much made for the quote unquote first grade or preschool sports fan. It's not made for kooks like me. I won't even call myself a diehard. I'm just a nut, a savant when it comes to this stuff. And when you have the same regurgitated narratives, as I've said over and over again, you see the debates. I don't even have to break it down for you. And it just gets jammed down your throat constantly. Left, right, sideways, up, down, backwards. I mean, it's mind-numbing. And to me, it's not entertaining. Who the hell cares about what Jerry Jones has to say, despite they're the star on America's team, so on and so forth? They're not any good. And they haven't been good in a long time. And I get it that that's part of the stick for Stephen A. And I'm calling him out in particular because obviously he has the thing with the Cowboy fans, and I get it that that's going to bring ratings, et cetera, so on and so forth. But it's just tired. Nobody wants to see that anymore. It's not any fun. Pick on the Raven fan. You're a Steeler fan, and I get it. There's 10 Raven fans to every million Cowboy fans that are out there. But still, have some fun with the Raven fan. Try to generate juice that way. At least they're more relevant than the Cowboys, despite the fact that they're ratings bonanza, Jerry, Dak, et cetera. I get that. But to me, this is one of the reasons why sports is a problem, because they just continue the same cycle of the same teams, same players, owners, et cetera, that after a while, you want to hear something else. Rarely do they talk about baseball. Rarely do they talk about hockey. Oh, well, we can't put that on there because our demographic or the people who watch, they don't watch that stuff. Well, they're not sports fans. They're not. Yeah, they may be sports fans because the NBA and NHL or NFL are popular. And of course, they're the biggest sports going, more so NFL than any other sport out there, NBA being second. But yes, could they even talk about teams in the middle of a pennant race there in baseball? Could they tell you anybody that's on the Milwaukee Brewers or the Cincinnati Reds or anybody on the Toronto Blue Jays? Please. They probably couldn't name any of those players at gunpoint. All right. Let me bring it back here because I could just go off on this topic forever. But this is a telltale sign as to why sports media is broken, and Joon is putting out there, and I am just following up with my bullet points as well.
Sports were becoming a source of stress rather than joy. And I quickly learned that I wasn't alone. And so I kept asking myself, how did this happen? And most importantly, what's next? If you don't know me, my name is Joon Lee, and I've been working in sports for almost 15 years as a sports journalist, writing, reporting, and doing television. My love for sports led me to pursue this job, but sports is more than that for me. Sports is the way that I see the world.
All right, at this point in the video, he does a little background as far as his upbringing, being in Boston, following the Boston sports teams, getting his job at ESPN, becoming a writer, etc., and how much he did enjoy and was grateful for working at ESPN. But I kind of spared you that only because it's a few minutes, and if you want to go back and watch the whole video, I'll leave a link in the description so you can see for yourself and get a better understanding of his background.
But now I'm here. And as I had the first opportunity to just sit back and watch sports as a fan for the first time in a decade, I noticed something. Sports media is broken. For decades, it felt like sports were always about more than just who won and who lost and the box score. Sports were a place to tell stories about underdogs and dynasties and heartbreak and redemption. And it feels like, at least right now, the entire industry has lost sight of that.
Yes, they have, because a lot of it has to do with everything that I explained about before, where these writers just want to put up clickbait titles or rage bait titles or the same, I hate to bang on the drum again, but the regurgitated narratives that proliferate a lot of the blogs, vlogs, podcasts, etc., where you just, again, you can't even avoid it, even if you try. And that is the problem that with a lot of the creators that are out there and even a lot of the writers, and I just don't want to target the young writers because it's easy for me as a middle-aged guy to say, it's the young guys that are doing this. No, I'm sure there are guys my age that are using a lot of the clickbait and using the usual suspects, whether it be the LeBron Jameses, the Patrick Mahomes, the Travis Kelce's, the Jerry Joneses, the Dak Prescotts, the Lakers, the Cowboys, the Chiefs. We all know the cast of characters where, of course, those are going to be hot topic, push button, clickbait titles for anyone and everyone to watch. But we all know, at least I do, as a just kook of a sports fan, I avoid a lot of that stuff because majority of those type of content, it's laughable, it's comical, and it certainly has no integrity with nothing but too much style, editing, etc., but a whole hell of a lot of zero substance.
I've been asking myself one question over the course of the last 2 years as I've been unable to work. How do we fix this?
I'll get into it.
First, it feels like every single ad, but also almost every segment now is catered to just one thing: sports gambling. I'm not personally against gambling, but the industry's grip on sports media has completely changed everything.
This is an enormous factor because for yours truly, I've never been a gambler. The old saying, scared money never wins. So I've never been one to do fantasy football. That's a whole other podcast to get into, or did point spreads or anything like that. Yeah, once in a while I've done Super Bowl boxes long ago in the past, but I've never been wrapped up into the sports gambling. And rarely do I talk about it on my podcast. I may make a couple of references in reference to point spreads if they're too big or, wow, it's a little bit closer than I thought. But besides that, I don't get wrapped up in that. And I understand that a lot of the podcasts out there, they use or I should say the other way around, the gambling houses will use the podcast to promote their gambling services on their platforms to go ahead and use whatever codes and percentages that they could take off as far as to use that particular gambling house, whatever that may be. And of course, there's a zillion of them, as I'm sure you well know. But also, to me, because of these creators or writers or whatever you want to call are in bed with these gambling houses, it certainly skews the point of view because you're thinking that, well, if they're working with these gambling houses, why would I want to listen to somebody not only just talk about gambling, unless you're just a degenerate gambler, but as far as sports talk, not to say it has to be pure, but it has to be real, it has to be authentic, and it has to come from a particular viewpoint or perspective that certainly not only makes a lot of sense, but comes with a lot of integrity. Where in today's day and age, somebody just wants to put out a clickbait title and then try to run with it. But in their video, they're talking nothing about the title, which doesn't make any sense. So this is one of the reasons why, as Joon puts it, sports media is broken. But there's another factor to it, which I'll get to in a moment, where it really goes into the weeds as far as trying to fix this thing on a whole.
The big wake-up call for me was the gambling scandal with Shohei Ohtani's translator. When the news broke, it felt like fans were completely suspicious of every single media outlet because they all get paid by sports books. And it's not just Vegas lines on SportsCenter anymore. It's odds integrated into broadcasts, reporters covering sports like financial analysts, and athletes signing deals with sports books. Fans don't know who to trust anymore.
Listen, I'm not going to be naive to think that there may be something going on if you're really paying attention. Just recently, you had the two Cleveland Guardian pitchers, Luis Ortiz and Emmanuel Clase, right now being suspended by baseball as they investigate to see whether or not that they weren't throwing games, but maybe influencing the integrity of certain games earlier this summer. And let's see how that all unfolds. But one more time, when I watch a game, the first thing I'm thinking about, or I should say I'm not thinking about, is, oh, is this fixed? Or, oh, what's going on here? Ooh, that's a little bit shady. I mean, it has to be something obvious, like a player throwing a ball in the stands, or if there's a wide open receiver, you overthrew him by like 20 yards, something like that. Oh, I'd really be suspicious and think, wait a minute, what the hell just happened there? But that's the problem. And I'm sure a lot of the younger fan probably looks at sports because they gamble and because they get involved with fantasy, especially with football, that they're just so wrapped up in the numbers. They're just so wrapped up in winning that every move, every trade, every transaction that they make, especially as we're getting towards football season now, that it's almost a thing where it's life or death. And because the gambling houses are tied in, talk about the irony, because the NFL wanted nothing to do with gambling back in the 70s. When you think about Jimmy the Greek, if you don't know who Jimmy the Greek is, you definitely should look him up. I'm sure somewhere on YouTube. But he was a guy going back to the NFL today 50 years ago with he and Brent Musburger, where he wouldn't talk about point spreads, but he would talk about intangibles. He would talk about certain things between two teams that you would have to look out for, that if you were to gamble or were to pick a team, I would hedge my bet this way. Or, you know what, I would pick that team here. Or guess what? This is a warm weather team going to a cold weather city. I would take the home team in this case. All those things that you'd have to read between the lines back then that the NFL wanted nothing to do with, where today, oh no, bring on the DraftKings, bring on the Caesars Sportsbook, bring on all of the FanDuels, whatever, because the more money we have, the more money the owners and everybody be just singing in the streets and just up to their eyeballs in money. But as we all know, is it really worth it when the fans are the ones that get the short end of the stick in the long run?
Even reporters I know personally, like Jeff Passan, who I know is one of the most trustworthy people in the business, is viewed with suspicion. It matters when every close game is met with conspiracy theories and joy turns into anger. We're losing the whole essence of sports right now. The excitement, the unpredictability, the magic, all of it feels like it's slowly slipping away because of how much of the industry is now centered around gambling. Fans are constantly questioning, are reporters covering the games honestly? Are they just pushing hot take and gambling narratives? Are leagues prioritizing the interests of fans? Or are they just focused on maximizing the gambling revenue? We've seen scandals like this almost break sports before, from Pete Rose to Tim Donaghy, but now there's Jonte Porter and potentially Terry Rozier. And with the way that decisions are made now, the way that media covers everything, it's all clouded by money and gambling, just looming over everything. Second, it feels like when you tune into traditional sports media now, everything feels the same. It's a hot take debate about the same topics. If LeBron is the GOAT, if Jordan is better than him, if Patrick Mahomes is going to surpass Tom Brady, it makes sports feel like pro wrestling. And fans notice this. It feels like the same manufactured debates are happening every single day. And the shows that used to dive a little bit deeper are all getting canceled. I think it's why we're seeing so many amazing independent creators emerge on a place like YouTube or on TikTok. There's people like Kenny Beecham and Bailey at Foolish Baseball and Kofi. These creators are doing awesome things on YouTube, diving deep, exploring fandom.
Now, I've watched a couple of these creators. Kenny Beecham, for one, he goes by Kenny for real. He talks a lot of NBA. I watched a lot of him throughout the postseason. And I got to be real with you, he does bring a little analysis, actually a lot of analysis. And he does bring a lot of the analytics into it as well when he's talking about, oh, this guy doesn't do well in the pick and roll, or, oh, when he goes through back screens, this and that, which is good. And that's fine. But that's not for me. I want to hear analysis, but I also want to hear some opinions. I want to hear him cut some people to ribbons if necessary, or obviously praise them when they do well. I don't want to hear a guy just talk about how, oh, well, they do well in a pick and roll setting in a half court as opposed to transition. We watch the games. We understand that. But as far as him saying that, oh, this guy had such a terrible shooting game, or, oh, this guy didn't show up in the biggest game of his life, or, oh, wow, what a performance that this player. That's what you want to see. To me, that's what's much more entertaining in my eyes. And just to get a recap of the game and some analysis mixed in with a little analytics, it doesn't really do it for me. Does it do it for you? Please leave a note in the comments. I'd be curious to know.
Telling great stories in a way that traditional sports media isn't doing anymore. As a result of where traditional sports media still is, it feels like the majority of fans are still stuck on these same topics that all of us are tired of talking about.
Well, here's a way to fix that. You got to go to sources that you know are not only reliable, but also at the same time, you know that they're going to bring a certain, I don't want to say flair, but there is an integrity aspect involved. That's like going to watch First Take every day to get your sports talk, where you know they're going to talk about the same thing over and over and over again. You got to go elsewhere, whether that means you're going to local sports talk radio, or if you're going to national sports talk radio, whether that be satellite, terrestrial, etc., or if there is a particular creator that you like, or writer, podcaster, etc., where you know that they're, as I like to say, they're going to come correct, direct, and in full effect. It's not going to be a thing where they're going to poo-poo it or they're going to half-ass it. You know that they watch the games, they critique it, they break it down, but at the same time, they're ready to call out a particular manager, a particular player, a GM, owner, etc. That's what it's about. But they do it in a fair manner. There's nothing personal about it. If we see a player have a poor game, let's say in the playoffs, a game 5, and you expect them to rise to the occasion. I don't want to pick on anybody here, so I'm not going to call any names. But if it's a situation where they've not been good when the money's on the line and they spit the bit again, whether they have an 0 for 4 with a golden sombrero in baseball in the playoffs, or whether they shoot 3 for 16 and 0 for 5 from 3 in a game 5 of an NBA playoff, or a hockey player that is a superstar had 1 shot on goal and also was a -2 in the game. Yes, they need to be called out. And that's the only way that people who really take this craft seriously are going to be taken seriously by sports fans. And I get it that there are a million people like yours truly that are out there trying to blaze a path or carve a trail in this space for some credibility. But that's another thing that is being shot here, which I'll get to in a minute when it comes to sports media being broken. The good old C word. Remember, credibility. I'm going to come back with that in a little bit.
Because of these hot takes, it feels like nobody trusts anyone anymore. From fans to the media, to the athletes, to the leagues, trust is at an all-time low in sports. And this is hurting everyone involved in sports. And I think we can do better than this. But here's the incredible and crazy part. Sports have never been more interesting than they are right now. But if you looked at the headlines, it would feel like everything is falling apart. On the field, it feels like we're witnessing history every single night. Shohei Ohtani is doing something in baseball that we haven't seen since Babe Ruth, and he's doing it better. Patrick Mahomes might be the most talented quarterback we've ever seen. Victor Wembanyama is redefining what's possible for a basketball player on the court. Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese are elevating women's sports to a level we've never seen before. And Kylian Mbappe is already a global icon, and he's only in his mid-20s. And yet, if you watch traditional sports media, it would feel like even though these incredible things are happening, that all of them are terrible for the future of sports.
And you want to know why that's the case? Because a lot of these sports fans, especially the younger sports fans that are trying to see what they can do to get into this business, one, they don't really know the history of the sport. And that goes across all sports. They feel that sports started in 2010 when they need to go way back to really massage and get deep in the weeds on its history to get a better feel for the greats that played prior to 2010 and certainly in the 20th century. And then the other thing is too, is that they are only stuck within those two sports, football and basketball, and maybe a little college football. If you were to bring up hockey or even baseball to a certain degree, they're not going to get into that because it's not as interesting. We know the NFL now has become a 12-month sport. NBA to a lesser degree, but we know that the NBA has big-time personalities. And I don't need to go through the list. I'm sure if you're an NBA fan, you know who I'm referring to. But with baseball, and although they have two of the biggest stars in the game and in sports overall with Aaron Judge and Shohei Ohtani, but for a lot of people, baseball is a 20th century sport. It has gotten old. The rules had to be changed and the game had to be shortened in order to try to reel in a lot of the younger folks because for the most part, it is an old man's game. And don't let me get started on hockey, because hockey, that was my 1A sport back in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. And I'll save that for another time. But I could talk hockey with the best of them. I could talk about the 4 majors in golf. I could talk about tennis. I could talk about you name it. But are a lot of the sports fans who are trying to get into this business, are their lens wide open to that point where they're ready to take on and watch and learn and critique, and more importantly, go back into the history books to watch and follow each and every one of these sports and what happened yesteryear? I think you know the answer to that. A big, fat, resounding no.
And beyond superstars, sports is way more international than it's ever been before. The NFL is playing games in Europe. MLB is playing games in Asia. The NBA is playing games in Paris. And these sports are starting to catch on around the world. And at the same time, it feels like global soccer has never been bigger in the United States. Across sports, we're seeing the entire landscape completely change, but it feels like no one is covering this incredible story happening in motion in front of our eyes. And despite everything I've said, good sports journalism still exists. The problem, though, is that most of it is completely behind a paywall and is hard for the average person to access.
Which that's also a major problem, because I don't subscribe to The Athletic and some of the others. I guess Bleacher Report, maybe there's a paywall involved there. I don't know, because I really don't read a lot of the journalists that are out there that are on those particular platforms. To me, and I'll be honest, full transparency, I get a lot of my sports news, not only, of course, from watching the games, but on talk radio. And no, not here locally on ESPN or even WFAN. I listen to terrestrial radio. So if I'm going to go to someone that I know I could trust, to someone I know that has the breadth of and wealth of sports knowledge, that, of course, reliable, dedicated, that they are not only just passionate, but they take their craft as serious as can be, those are the people I gravitate to, because the ones that don't, or the ones that are kind of and I know there are a lot of great writers out there, but again, I'll read an article from time to time and certainly get into it, but it's not as if I'm going to a particular writer, not like I did back in the day, whether it was Mike Lupica or there was Rick Riley or guys like that. Not to say that those guys are few and far between, but at the same time, other than the beat reporters for the Mets or the Islanders or for the teams that I root for, just to get game summary or injury updates or things of that nature, to me, not to say it's a lost art, but I'd rather listen to it than read it. Although I'm not against reading an article or going in depth to somebody's op-ed or column on a particular event, player, game, etc. But again, it's where you get your sources, and the sources that you trust, that you know that what you're getting is going to be 100% unfiltered, true, etc. That goes back to the integrity thing. And no, I didn't forget, credible as well.
The loudest things that get through on social media for free happen to be the loudest takes. The stories are there,
which is the problem.
The talent is there, and the game is evolving beyond what we've ever seen before. But at the same time, it feels like the media, a lot of it, is still stuck in the past.
In the past, in what degree, though? I don't know if he's going to expound on that, but to me, if they're stuck in the past, it's maybe because they're the old crabby sports writer that is not only edgy, but maybe a little irascible. And it's a thing where it's like, oh, well, this is how I'm built and nobody's going to change me. The old leopard doesn't change his spots. I mean, I don't know. But now, before we get to the last part of this, my thing is the credibility. And that is enormous when it comes to someone like myself who is trying to, again, find my way in this space. Because who the hell is going to listen to me if I'm just going to put hot take after hot take after hot take, or worse, try to watch somebody else's work and then try to implement it into mine? I have my own opinions, my own thoughts based on what I watch. All right, some of it that I read, whether it's the rumor mill when it comes to trades or firings, hirings, etc. But at the same time, the credibility is the one thing that gets lost in all this. And how I look at it when it comes to sports media being broken, not only is integrity a huge thing, but even bigger is the credibility. Because you want to go to that person to know that you trust what it is that they're saying, what it is that they're putting forth. You just don't want to go to somebody that's going to be in front of a microphone and say, well, LeBron James, I still think he is the best player in the league at 41 years of age, and here's why. I mean, seriously, do we really need to hear another take about LeBron James? And yes, even at 41, he's still great. But you already know there's more than a handful of players that you would draft right now if you were to start an NBA team over LeBron James. And that's not just based on his age. We're just talking about talent here. But again, you're going to take the younger legs. You're going to take the guys that obviously are going to have the more endurance, more stamina than somebody at 40 years old, even though LeBron is a freak. But again, that's where the integrity as well as the credibility comes in. People are going to look for people, or at least I would think they would, that are going to not only speak their minds, but speak truthfully and have a lot of dignity and a lot of character in their work to know that, oh, this is a guy that I want to keep going back to because not only does he say it like it is, but he means it.
So what are we going to do about it? Because I don't want to just sit here and complain because that's the easy thing to do. I want to do something about it. That's why I'm launching this YouTube channel. I want to build a community that values the joy around sports. I want to build a community that reminds us why we fell in love with sports in the first place. I want to do deep dive stories. I want to do interviews with players, coaches, fans, executives that go beyond just what we see on the field. I want to do experiences that go beyond the wins and losses because sports aren't just something to be watched. There's something to be felt. It's why I'm not going to be taking any gambling sponsorships on this YouTube channel because I want to center trust again between me and you. I want to make sure that when I'm reporting something or I'm telling a story that you feel like you can trust that I have no exterior motivations motivating me to hold something back or to tell stories a different way.
And I second that. As I said before, and I'll say it another time, gambling and me do not mix. I've never been a gambler, never been into fantasy, the whole nine. And it would be just unlike me to take any type of sponsorship from a gambling house. And I understand it may be tempting, and who knows, if they dangle that carrot in front of me, I would probably think about it, but I would know, me personally, knowing that that has not been in any part of my DNA throughout the course of my 56 plus years of existence, that to all of a sudden to go to the money, to be, hey guys, now I'm being sponsored by gamblinghouse.com. Everybody's gonna look at me and laugh. I've been talking about this for years. I've been saying how much I've killed fantasy football, how it's quote unquote immoral in my eyes. More on that in another podcast or vlog coming at you maybe sometime in the near future. But in all seriousness, for me to all of a sudden turn my back on what I've pretty much felt as an adult while watching sports and not getting into gambling, etc., and then all of a sudden to say, hey guys, sorry, can you please follow and I'll get 10% or I'll get a cut of your subscription or your participation in using the promo code, etc. I want you guys and gals to trust me, and I hope you have. For those who have followed me, my day ones or day twos or day hundreds, etc. But even if you're just hopping on board, rest assured that the last thing or the last company or companies that I will surely be enticed by, even if they were to dangle that carrot, are those gambling houses. I'll refuse even one thin dime.
Most importantly, I want to make sense of what's happening in the sports world with you because I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around everything that's changing right now. And I started off with something simple. I stepped into the batter's box against MLB veteran reliever Adam Ottavino to get a sense for what it's like to face a professional athlete in their craft. I want to get a sense for why hitting a baseball is the hardest thing to do in sports. So make sure to subscribe and follow me.
Yeah, he puts up good content, and I love it that he's transparent, and which a lot of these guys out here aren't. They feel like they don't have to put forth just an iota of, oh, well, I don't have to tell you anything. I don't have to reveal what it is that I truly feel or whatever. I'm just out here trying to get clicks or trying to make a name for myself or whatever. So for him to go that route, and I truly believe that in order for this to really get back on the mend for fans, for people who love sports, to really gravitate towards somebody in that space that they know it's safe and that they know it's coming from a good place with a lot of trust and a lot of determination and, again, integrity and credibility in their work, that's the only way that this is going to get fixed. But sadly, for every person like myself or Joon, there's going to be countless others that are going to do it their way. And unfortunately, the only way this is going to get fixed is if they think about the former and certainly not the latter. If you made it this far, thank you so much for stopping by and watching my recent video content, etc. Here's another video that I want you to check out. It was one of my first critique videos that I put forth a couple of months ago. And this one happened to be about Damian Lillard. Now, of course, he's back in Portland, but at the time, did he really get a raw deal from the Bucks? Was it a situation where he got thrown out like the trash? I understand this is old news, but it's something that is certainly relevant throughout any sports fan, because this isn't going to be the first time, nor will be the last, when a player gets discarded by a team. Thanks so much for passing by. Leave a note in the comments. I'll follow up, and thanks for watching.